Alright guys, so I thought I was recording last time, but I ended up finding out that I wasn't even recording. So anyway, I want to show you guys how to bring in your own weapon and set up your own weapon with the system. So the first thing you need to check though is check your weapon. And so this one has a skeletal mesh and it has a static mesh variant. So I'm just going to start with the skeletal mesh. So I'm going to open it up and I'm going to go into the top perspective. And the barrel should be facing towards the positive Y direction. It should be facing down like this, because that's how my weapons that I brought over from the ALS weapons that I use in this project, that's how they're aligned. And you can actually align them. You can actually rotate them and stuff. That's fine. It just makes things a little bit easier if all your weapons are aligned the same way. So I really highly recommend doing it this way. If your weapons have some really weird rotations on them, for example, if you have somebody making weapons for you and they're exporting them all weird like for example, if they're rotated like this, for example, they're all like sideways and at an angle and make them fix it. That's all I can say, because you don't want to have to mess with that. That throws stuff way off. So my setup, it assumes that these are level with this plane right here. That the top of this is perfectly level with the ground. That's how my zeroing system works. So this one it's level, even though that it has a 90-degree rotation, and technically that would be fine. But just for brevity's sake, I like to rotate all these anyway. So I'm going to actually export this. This is one way to do it. If it's already in your project, then you can just export it. I export without level of detail or collision when I do this. And then what we can do is we can go to our asset details. And if you go to window, it should be checked right here. Mine is docked to the side. I did that intentionally. But anyway, if I scroll down to the import settings, you'll see that we have a transform and import rotation. Now the thing to know is that clockwise is positive and counterclockwise is negative. So if it's facing this direction and we need to rotate it this way, then it's going to be -90. But since the barrel is right here, we need to rotate it this way, and so that's +90. And so we can put 90 here. Now there's something, they've been doing a lot of work on the way things are handled for the importing process. And so there's some kind of weird bug. After you do this, all these settings will disappear. I don't know why, but they will. All but a couple of them will. So what we're going to do is we're going to try this, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're just going to re-import with new file after we've set that 90-degree offset. And I'm just going to select that. And in my case, it worked. For you, it might not. You may have to take this into Blender and fix it, but it's up to you. You could also do it this way, actually. So I could go to import, and I could just select this. And I can add a 90-degree offset right here. You'll see I already did that actually. Yours will say 0. And then you'll just put a 90-degree offset right here. And then import. But yeah, so that's how that works. If you're dealing with a static mesh, then you can actually, for example, I'm just going to zero this out. And then I'm actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm actually going to take this one step further. And I'm just going to kind of bring it up and forward a bit. so that these triggers are aligned with each other. And if you go to edit and you go to plugins and you type in skeleton, you should see the skeletal mesh editing tools, and you can check that and restart. If you're using my project with my config file settings, it'll already be enabled. And so what we'll do is we'll use that to convert this to a skeletal mesh. But first we're going to go into modeling mode. We're going to go to Xform. We're going to bake transform and then accept. That'll zero out the rotation. And then I'm going to go to edit pivot, world origin, and accept. And that'll zero out the location. And so now I just changed the transform of it. And now what I can do is I can actually convert this to skeletal mesh. And by default, it'll say bottom center. You're going to change that to origin for the root bone placement. And then we're going to convert it. And if you open this up, you'll see that the root bone is actually right there where the world origin was. So, and you'll see the green arrow is pointing this way along the green. And so if we go into the top, it's pointing right. Okay, so that's basically the prerequisite for your weapons. Those are just my recommendations. You don't have to do it like that. These do have held object definitions where you can rotate and offset them and all that, but I like to try to minimize that as much as possible so that things are as consistent as possible. Also, because fingers, the fingers are going to be in a very specific place, and I like to try to minimize those tiny little fixes. But let's just go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to use this skeletal or the static mesh one that I made. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it data. And I'm actually going to set this up for the metahumans. But before we do that, we actually need to add a gameplay tag for this weapon. So I'm going to go to edit, project settings. And if you go into gameplay tags, you'll see this GT DAO states. That's under the DAO blueprints data. It's right here. I'm just going to double click on it though. And I'm going to, so I actually already added one in here. I'm just going to duplicate the M4A1. And then I'm going to click and drag to move it up here. And I'm just going to name this M1A1. And I'm going to name that M1A1. And so you can also go to manage and you can actually add it to the default gameplay tags.ini directly, but I didn't do that. It's up to you if you want to do that. But you'll see it's under here now. And you can just right click and add subtag to the rifle if you want to do it that way instead. But anyway, moving on. That's all we needed to do for that. I'm actually just going to add this. I'm going to set this up for the Kellen guy. I actually haven't added him to the widget yet, so let me just go ahead and add him to the widget. There we go. I should be able to select them from the widget now. And I just want to make sure that everything is working right. It is. Okay. I'll add more poses for the rifles later. So just be looking out for that. Right now, I know it's a lot of people are like, oh, people don't hold it by the magazine. And you're right, but at the time I did that for several reasons. One, people could repurpose that for weapons with grips or for like submachine guns. And 2, some characters might be really short, and so they'll have a hard time reaching the barrel. Their arms will actually lock, and they'll, depending on how big the barrel, the gun is. In that case, I would actually just recommend scaling the weapon down, guys, if your character is too small to reach the barrel. I am going to add a barrel pose, aiming pose in here, or a set. I'm going to have a whole set of poses for that purpose later on. But yeah, anyway, let's just go ahead and go in here, and under the class defaults, DAO, held objects, we're going to add 1 to this map, and we're going to select that rifle M1A1. And what we need to do is browse to this M4A1 right here. And I'm actually just going to copy that over into this folder. And I'm going to rename this to M1A1. And I'm going to assign it right here. And then we're going to open it up, and we're going to assign the weapon mesh to this. So I'm going to add this one that I made from the static mesh. That's the skeleton. I need the skeletal mesh. And I'm actually not using this stuff here, but I'm going to go ahead and set it anyway. This actually isn't being used currently in the project, just so you guys know, but I added it to show you. And that stuff is actually held under the primary. We have this item ID. That's all we need to do for that. Now we have it set up so that it should be able to switch to it now. Yep. And so we're switching to it, but you'll see we're getting this none right here, and that's because we haven't set it up to have a data asset yet. So what we're going to do now is, if you go into the get held object settings right here, you'll see a chooser, and this is actually what's returning the held object settings and the live retargeting settings and everything for the live retargeted characters. They use this, and I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to add one of these to here, and I'm going to browse to this one. And I'm just going to copy all this stuff right here over to the data folder. I'm going to call it M1A1. And now in this asset right here, this is what stores all those settings. I'm going to replace this held object definition with the M1A1, and I'm going to expand to these, and the aiming goes under aim, and the ready goes under the ready stance. And then this right here is what I'm going to assign right here to this chooser. And I'm going to give it the M1A1 gameplay tag. And if you look here, you'll see I have this set to any, but I have it set to match exact, and this has to be input in row value. I'm not going to go into detail on this stuff. It is a bit confusing. I actually set it wrong the first twice in a row. Actually, I set this stuff up wrong, so it's not difficult to accidentally mess up on this. But this is actually a gameplay tag container. It has to be a container. It can't evaluate like individual gameplay tags. It's just going to evaluate them as a container. So that means that if you have it set to all, so if you have this set to all, that means that it's going to evaluate this for all of the gameplay tags that are in the container. And I'm actually using this for more tags than just the rifles. So that's the reason why you want to set it up like this. So I'm pressing the button on the left side of my mouse, not the left mouse button, but the one on the actual side of the mouse. I'm pressing the one of those buttons to toggle this. But if you go into the DAO input settings, this is the thing that toggles it. You can set this to whatever you want. And if you press this one time, it'll just set it to aim. And then if you press it again, it'll stop aiming. That's mostly for debugging purposes. Now you'll see that he's actually already holding it almost perfectly. And that's because I aligned that over here to the trigger. And that's the reason why I did that. But you'll see his hand on that other one was on the magazine right here, whereas this magazine is way back here. So that reduced the amount of stuff I have to do for the hand placement, but I will have to bring this back and I will have to bring this forward. It's actually too far inside there, and maybe that looks okay to you, but I'm just going to, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm just going to open up this held object definition here, and let's just say that it's messed up. Well, what I'll do then is, before I set the rotation of it, the Y and the X rotation of it, I'll actually try to align the position as best I can, and then I'll rotate it on the Y and the X, because the offset of the direction that this moves in will actually be the original orientation of the weapon. And that's just how I have it set up right now. I may change the way that's handled in the future so that it's moving in relation to the hand or something. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I might add a uniform scale to it as well later on. But I think this is fine. We could make this a little bit smaller. Yeah, so we could do that. And then we could move it left and right and back and forth. And we can move it up and down. And then for the aiming, we can actually move this forward. And I might actually just move this up. And this is probably a gun that you would want your own pose for, because as you can see here, it kind of, the arm is just too far in for this gun. And you'd probably actually want the arm to be out further for it to look right. Yeah, so I'm not going to go over, I'll go over that briefly, but I'm not going to actually walk you through it. So I'm just going to, we're only going to use the static local offsets. These are cool, guys, because they move in component space, and it's easier to position it. But this will cause an offset when he's aiming up and aiming down. His hand will actually come off the gun. So that's why I'm not actually using that. It's a little bit more confusing this way, but yeah. So that might be good enough. Depending on how like perfect you want to try to get it. But yeah, in reality, you probably would want that between his arm and his body. Or you would want to modify the pose so that he's holding it better. So I'll go over briefly how you would modify the pose, but I'm not actually going to do a full video on all that now. I might do another separate video on that later. That's basically it for this. I'm going to save it, and if I come out of this, that actually doesn't look too bad. I mean, it doesn't look good. I don't like the way he's holding it personally, but if you were trying to avoid making your own poses, you can rotate these too, by the way. So yeah, that's basically it. And you don't even have to aim, mess with the aim, because I've already zeroed this aim in for you right here. But if you modify the pose, if you rotate the hand in any way, when you modify the pose, and even if you don't, if you just move the hand back and forth, it's still very likely you're going to have to re-zero in the aim right there. And as far as that goes, if you see those numbers that are printing right there, that's the accuracy. That's how far from center it is. And so that also prints out in the output log, which is why I have this docked down here. And so if I wanted to try to zero it in, I'd shoot a couple of times with a slight delay between shots, and you'll see that both of those numbers are the same. And I would subtract whatever that number is. Even if it's a negative number, I'll subtract it. So this is a negative number, and I'll subtract that from here. And so I actually reoriented these so that they matched the positions on here in which you need to add these. So Y is the center one, and R is this one. And you'll see it's a little bit more accurate now. So it's not going to be perfectly like pinpoint shoot a quarter off a rock on the moon accurate, but it'll get you there. It'll get you to where he's pointing towards the center of the screen, and that's all that really matters. So that's basically it for how that works. I'll go ahead and do a brief rundown on the poses and how they work. So I'm not going to show you how to do that for the metahumans today, because that process is a bit more involved. I'll be honest with you, but what I will do is I'll show you how to do it for the UEFN ones. So under the M4A1, actually let's just go to the. Let me just collapse all this stuff. I have too much stuff expanded. Go into the char data, linked anim layer, and go under the rifle and the rifle default, this one right here. Go to the class defaults, and you'll see that we have these poses right here. These are the layering settings for standing and crouching. Crouch is almost exactly the same as stand. It's just that I'm not applying the pelvis and mesh space when crouching. But for these poses right here, you can go over here and press this, go to edit and sequencer, and I'm just going to unlink this. But I'm going to go to bake to control rig, and I'm going to bake that to the control rig. And now it'll create a sequence, and it'll automatically link this to that pose. And so now all I need to do is I'm gonna get this weapon here, since I've already this is actually the same one I'm using, and I'm just going to add this in here. Actually, that's not the same one. That's actually the static mesh one. Is this the... Yeah, that's the static mesh. So I'm going to come over here to my weapon and look for... I'm going to drag this skeletal mesh out. I'm actually going to zero... Let me see. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the held object... or I'm going to go to this stuff, and I'm going to go to the M1A1, and I'm going to open up this, and I'm going to open up the held object definition, and I'm actually going to do this. So I can't copy and paste this, I don't think. Let's see. Okay, I can. If you do this before you add it to sequencer, you can copy and paste. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to sequencer, and then I'm going to add the selected one in the viewport. I'm going to right click, convert selected binding to spawnable actor. And then I'm going to press this plus sign. I'm going to attach it to the M4A1, and I'm going to look for a weapon R. Oh, okay, so I was using the metahuman. Okay, so if this was a metahuman, that's how you would do it. But I actually don't need any offsets for this one, because it's already aligned with the with that. And so you'll see it's inside of his chest too. So although his arm doesn't look to be as straight down as the metahumans did, for whatever reason. That's probably because of how the IK retargeter handles that arm chain. So we're going to right click on this. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to hold control and zoom out. I'm just going to delete this last key. I like to do that if it's a single pose. And then I'm going to go to global control, expand it. And if you go down here, you'll see these switches, and this will switch it to IK. And so I'm switching both his hands to IK. And then I'm going to right click on the CRUEFN mannequin body, add section additive. This means that any change we make now will be added over the top of that pose. And so what I'll start off doing is, actually, I'm just going to bring this in. Like that. And then I'm going to go to constraints, add constraint, parent, and I want to select this box here, which is the hand R control. And if I select this hand L control and I right click on this, I can tell it I don't want it to be a dynamic offset. I do want it to maintain its offset though. And so now if I select this control, you'll see when I move this one, the other one stays in place. And so what I might do is just say, okay, well, this gun has a really long thing here, and he's going to have a hard time trying to reach it. So I could actually just rotate his body more like this. I could handle it this way. So it's totally up to you. For a short assault rifle like this, I don't know why this is so long. So anyway, it just kind of overcomplicates things. I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. And instead, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to have this a hip fire weapon. Yep, and there you go. That's basically it, guys. If I save it, then it should update. Yeah, so see, when you save it, it'll automatically update. And if you ever want to go back, you can come over here and just open up level sequence. Don't unlink it. If you unlink it, then you lose connection. It loses connection to this, and any changes you make in it will not update this automatically. You can relink it though later. But let's go to open level sequence, and you'll see it's still there. My additive track is still here. So if I want to make any changes, or if I want to undo the changes, I can delete this. Or I can make another additive section, and I can layer over the top of those changes, and I can stack them. So, yeah, I mean, it's totally up to you. And if you ever say, okay, I don't like that, you could just delete it. And now it's back to how it was. And if you didn't like that, you could delete it, and now it's back like it was. And now if I save it and I go back over here, you'll see that it's back like it was inside of here. You actually saw it change back whenever I opened it back up. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. If you do that, make sure that your enable hand LIK curve is set here. And this is a metadata curve. So if you go and you add any curve, you can go over here and convert it to metadata. Metadata just means that it's going to have a solid value of 1. So, yeah. And that's basically the rundown. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.